All right. Thank you all again for joining us today as we walk through Lightstep's latest product feature, Change Intelligence. My name is Kelly Bakelich. I'll be your host for today. Before we get started, I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. First up, if you want to follow along with today's demonstration, you can log on to your Lightstep account. And if you don't have a Lightstep account, you can get a free developer account at app.lightstep.com/signup/developer. Also the link on the screen right now. Second, we have a Q&A session with our speaker at the end of the presentation. So if you are new to Zoom and would like to ask a question, just feel free to use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen and I'll add that to our queue. Next up, we are recording today's session and you will receive a copy of this either later today or early tomorrow. So feel free to revisit this, share with your friends and colleagues, whatever you'd like to do. And lastly, if you are experiencing any technical issues, feel free again to just use that chat feature and I'll assist you as soon as possible. Okay, now the fun begins. I'm very excited to introduce today's speaker, Parker Edwards. Parker leads our solutions engineering group at Lightstep and is a longtime monitoring and observability enthusiast. Parker works with our customers to design, implement, and improve modern, scalable observability practices using Lightstep and OpenTelemetry. And I have to say, Parker has a very cute Australian Labradoodle, which I think is adorable. So with that, I give you Parker Edwards.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I could not be more excited to have an opportunity to talk to folks today about change intelligence. And I will point out my dog's oil painting right behind us. He is pretty adorable. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about Lightstep, and I'll be showing you a demonstration of change intelligence in action. But before we get there, I think it's really important to just give you some context around how we got to this place, because our approach to observability is pretty unique, and that is influenced by the journey that we've taken as an organization. So Lightstep is an observability company to our core. Our leadership here, including our CEO and various co-founders, built the metrics and distributed tracing data stores at Google, Monarch and Dapper. Both of those are open sourced via research paper if you'd like to learn more. But through that, they really learned how to build scalable and resilient and cost-effective systems to store data like metrics and distributed tracing. The first trace visualizer kind of at scale, Zipkin, was built by our CTO at Twitter. And we are co-founders of the Open Tracing project, which has, of course, been merged with Open Census into Open Telemetry. And we sit on various governance committees there, technical committees. We're very eager to drive the project and through that drive the future of observability to be really democratized, easily accessible, and high quality instrumentation that you don't have to worry about. So if you are interested in learning more about Open Telemetry specifically, or any of Lightstep's kind of services around there, including our consulting around Open Telemetry, you can certainly follow up with me. I'm Parker at lightstep.com. But we also have a lot of customers to thank for where we are today as well. We have a lot of verticals up here represented, the fintech space, consumer space. The common thread, though, is that all of these organizations have pretty complex architectures. And through that complexity, they are generating a ton of data. For the average daily processed amount for Lightstep, it's about 2.5 petabytes a day, if not over that now. And so we're really excited to have been able to help make sense of this data. And we're really, really excited about the future that change intelligence brings to helping continue further our goal to make observability more accessible. And when we talk about accessibility, really, we're thinking about a single pain point. And that is that now more than ever, it is so easy to find worrisome symptoms, but it's difficult or impossible to figure out what changed, right? And if we say that another way, it's that because of the complexities of our system, because of the scale and the ephemerality that's been introduced through cloud native architectures, we are drowning in data. But we still have no idea what's happening. Every piece of additional data does not provide us with additional context. And that really comes down to how we think about solving this problem. And Lightstep has really internalized this pain point. And when we think about this, when we think about trying to distill this data into something actionable, we're really trying to answer what we believe is the most important question in observability. And that is, what caused that change? And we can think about this as really the relationship between cause and effect, right? So if we're thinking about change being changes in our customer experience, we could have changes in our resource consumption or in the semantics that are processed by our applications. And when we see those changes and we see the impact of those changes, how do we back into what caused that when we have a multi-layered distributed system? And the cause could be anywhere. It could be a service deployment on some upstream service. It could be a new config push or a workload change, or even a broken third-party dependency. In all of this, all of these variables and attribution has led the folks that we've worked with to come to Lightstep and ask, there has to be a better way. And so if we were to make this a little bit more actionable, and we'll get into this in the demo as well, but let's imagine that you see a spike in your CPU utilization. What do you do next? And really, there are a couple of options that we see play out here. And interestingly, they don't seem to have much to do with the developer's awareness or knowledge about the system, but more their knowledge and the amount of time that they've invested into learning the tooling and learning the data that is in that tooling. And so when you have a spike in CPU utilization, for most developers, we see two things happen. The first is, well, you're an observability super expert anyway. You've seen this problem, you know where to go to in the tool to find out the information that will tell you where in the architecture you need to take that next step. But more likely than not, it's going to play out in an option 2, where you're just overwhelmed. And that can come from having to pull in multiple engineers into a debugging conversation. It can come from having to grep logs or grep through logs and piece together clues, like some game of murder mystery, to identify like how different relationships between charts might be explaining some symptomatic behavior. But we're here today because, frankly, we've built a better option, an option 3, and that is that by taking the data that we have and really designing intuitive and intentional workflows around that data, we can allow you to understand changes across service boundaries with no prior training or knowledge of the tool. And this is what we believe pretty revolutionary when we think about how folks are using observability tooling and what are the things that are driving them to a tool like Lightstep today. We have an opportunity to significantly reduce anxiety for developers, improve their quality of life, and through that, improve the quality of your systems. And so when we see this in Lightstep, and you'll see this here in just a moment, all we have to do to make this actionable now in our product is to simply click on a spike and ask a very simple question: what caused that change? And that will trigger change intelligence. And the nice thing is this works on any chart, on any dashboard, including alerts. So we'll get into exactly what change intelligence looks like. But before we get into the demo, I just wanted to leave you with one quote. If you're not excited about the shift in approach that Lightstep is taking, I hope that you can be excited of this quote. Change intelligence is the ultimate added value that any engineer can get out of their observability system. This is a time-saving and effort-saving feature in an incident. And that's from Sam over at MessageBird, one of our early access customers who helped test out and validate our workflows around change intelligence. So our team's really excited. Our customers are very excited. We hope you're excited as well. And if you are new to Lightstep, you don't know or have experience with us, there are some other things that we are very good at, specifically that we can work off of an unsampled data set with no cardinality constraints. And that's going to allow you to go and make very advanced queries, do deployment tracking, look at SLOs and generate real-time dynamic service diagrams. All of this, of course, with no vendor lock-in, aligned fully to OpenTelemetry. If you have any questions here, certainly let me know. But with that, I think we can jump into the demo. And what would a demo be of an observability tool? We're telling you we can make things much more actionable. So to that end, we want to start in PagerDuty, everybody's favorite 2 a.m. alarm. And in this case, we have a demo account here in PagerDuty, and we have an alert that was triggered. Again, what's really nice about change intelligence is that it works on the signals you're already using. And now that Lightstep has support for any type of custom infrastructure application metrics, you can ingest this data and use the signals that you're probably already using to drive your PagerDuty alerts. The difference is with Lightstep, when you get an alert, you'll see here we have some basic details about our runbook that we want to follow. But importantly, when we view this alert in Lightstep, we'll bump over here to the alert itself. You'll note, in this case, we are currently okay. So this was a historic alert, but we can see really easily where we crossed the alert threshold. And now to explain this, from one click in from PagerDuty, all I have to do is simply click on the chart and ask what caused this change. And as I said earlier, this triggers change intelligence. And there's a couple of really interesting things that we're doing here. The first is that we're using the metric signals, using the concept of a service tag, which you're likely already collecting today, but our customer success team can also help ensure that you have that data necessary to connect the dots here. But the ability for us to start with a metric and then back into the parts of your system where we can start to trigger aggregate analysis based on the architecture of your distributed systems using the trace data that we have. What else is pretty unique here is that we can actually define the windows that Lightstep is using for our analysis. Throughout Lightstep, you'll find that there's this concept of a baseline and a regression window or a deviation window. And by allowing you the ability to set those timeframes, you can instruct Lightstep exactly what the normal for your system is, and then allow us to compare those two modes together. And through doing this, we're able to take all of the requests that occurred during these times and compare them together to identify what changed across the entire stack. And that's a lot of data. I think really interesting piece of value from Lightstep here is that we put it in front of you in very human readable ways. So we can zoom into our charts here that show us the deviation metrics and the baseline metrics. But if we scroll down, we actually already start to tell you the biggest changes that we saw in your system. And this is looking specifically at the warehouse service, and we backed into that through some of the metric calculation that we've done. You'll note you didn't have to ask for it. It just happens automatically. And what's nice is when you click in, we start to show you the components of those services. Where did your change likely come from? Or where would you have measured that change? We have the SLIs that you're probably using around latency, throughput, and error rate. So you can see for a particular hypothesis that we're bringing for you or bringing to you, how do these things change? And then importantly, we can show you the most likely causes of those performance changes. And this is looking at the entire stack. So you'll notice here as well that we stack rank them in order of confidence. Again, our goal is just to provide your developers very quickly with the information and hypotheses they need to understand where they need to invest their time. And in this case, there's a pretty noisy customer pro rule that was responsible for just 1% of traces during our baseline window, but jumped up to about 43% during the regression window. And alongside this hypothesis, it's really easy for me to jump up the stack and see where did that traffic all come from? Was this something that spurred from maybe a config change in a particular service, or is this a workload change coming from a change in traffic? In this case, it is a workload change, and it's easy for me to see that that's coming in through our iOS app. On the right, you can also break down and see more SLI information that compares the baseline to the regression. Importantly, you can also influence our analysis. So you can tell us, was this helpful for you? Tell us, yes, that goes back into the model. In this case, you also have access to all of the underlying data. I think the most important differentiation between Lightstep's approach and other approaches from both vendored and open source tooling is that we don't want you to be reliant on the individual data. While we have it and we have great interfaces to find the data that you might want to be looking at, we think that we can derive enough value from this in aggregate because of the investment that we've made on the custom data stores, so that you don't really have to look at this in order to get the data you need. This means no more opening up multiple tabs, multiple charts. You simply look at the insights that Lightstep is providing to you. And if you need to, maybe you want an individual request so that you can attach it to a Jira ticket. Maybe you want to use this as a springboard to jump into some other tools like your GitHubs or your external logging systems or support systems. You can always do that. But the value in Lightstep is that you don't have to. Now, the last thing I'll show you here before we wrap up today with some questions is that, again, this works on any chart. So you'll note here we have a warehouse health service chart, very similar to, I think, any other tooling that displays metric charts. But the interesting thing here, outside of just they are gorgeous charts, is that we can identify any of these blips, any of these changes, and again, simply click what caused this change, and we'll trigger change intelligence there. This is looking at go routines. We're using, again, any metric, as long as we can identify where in the stack that metric was emitted from, we can back into our change intelligence engine and start to tell you more information about how the rest of your stack might have influenced a particular signal. Now, final point here I'll make is that this is wicked fast. We're very, very proud of the charting. You'll note that this is a demo environment, so it changes pretty cyclically, but we have built this in-house to be not only cost effective, on average, we're about 75% cheaper than our nearest competitor, but also performant. You can send us a ton of information. We can make sense of it quickly, and there's no more spinning waiting for charts to load, even if you're doing week over week or month over month comparisons. Now, hopefully that is enough to give you a little bit more context about change intelligence. If you want to learn more, certainly feel free to reach out, ask us some questions here, or reach out to our team. You can always reach us at hello@lightstep.com, or if you're interested, again, my name's Parker at lightstep.com. And you can sign up as well using the developer sign up link that we shared earlier. Kelly, are there any questions I can answer?
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Parker. That was an awesome presentation. And we hope that you all found this information to be super valuable. So like Parker said, at this time, we're going to hop into our Q&A session. There are a few questions in the queue, and just a reminder, one, we're recording this session, so you'll receive a copy, and two, we will cover as many questions as we have time for. Okay, so first question, can I roll back changes based on your hypothesis?
Ooh. That's a great question. Certainly, there's a lot of hooks that you can build from Lightstep into other tools, both from our UI and through our APIs. So everything that I'm showing here today, we are or have plans to offer through an API. So you can always check out the docs there. If you wanted to build programmatic hooks, we actually have a lot of customers that do that, to say, reach out to Lightstep or have Lightstep reach out to you through webhooks when we notice a deviation, and take action based on the information that we have in change intelligence. Now, if you wanted to try this out today, and maybe you didn't want to build an integration or have our team build integrations for you, you can also, just to go back here very quickly to a change intelligence example, use the embedded data to build those bridges into the systems where you can take action on this information. So from here, I'll show you a bit about where those, we call them workflow links, live. The idea being that we can build workflows into these other tools. You'll see them here in the trace view. So we can take the attribution here, build bridges into the other system, and actually tie that context and pull that context in as well. Hopefully that answered your question, but if not, again, feel free to reach out and we can start a thread offline.
Awesome. Next question is, how unlimited is the unlimited cardinality? I see you do slicing, but by any tag there?
Absolutely. So this is the best way. I've been in the APM space now for about 7 years. Was previously more of a legacy type vendor. And the best way you can test this, because I know it sounds hard to believe, is put it to the test. We really do have unlimited cardinality support. While there's might be an upper bound, we've had folks send us key value pairs with billions of unique values in the system at any one time. Those are all indexed. Those are all searchable. And those are used in this correlations analysis as well.
Awesome.
So yeah, test us, please. We welcome the exercise.
Okay, so now we're going to get into a couple of pricing questions.
Okay.
How does your pricing compare to Datadog? And on top of that, do you charge more for change intelligence?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with our pricing model today, we have a couple of different components. And importantly, the work that we've done to build the time series databases and the span or trace databases, we've built those entirely in-house. Those are entirely custom. And the goal for that was performance and cost effectiveness. So on average, the two things I'll say about pricing versus Datadog, while I don't have their price sheet in front of me, our list price is significantly cheaper for an active time series. The other component is that we actually offer 15-second resolution on billing. And what that means is if you have, let's say, containers that are spinning up or spinning down in response to deployments or automation or orchestration from a layer like Kubernetes, those, when you recycle those, that does not last for, a minute or longer in other tools, or like it does in other tools. So if you have ephemerality concerns, and that is bumping up your pricing with other vendors because they price on unique, host IDs or whatever might be tied to a ephemeral pod, that is not a problem you'll run into in Lightstep. And so, as I said, the combination of these two things means that the folks we've talked to so far, we've seen about a 75% reduction in pricing compared to Datadog. And I'm sorry, Kelly, there was another part of that. Oh, change intelligence included. The one thing is that, we've talked about the metrics pricing is based on active time series. You can find this all on our pricing page, lightstep.com/pricing. The change intelligence also works off of trace data or distributed tracing data, and that is also explained on our pricing page. But we charge no extra functionality for the feature of change intelligence when you start having data in the system that we can work off of.
Awesome. I'm going to take us back to the first question, or the previous question about cardinality. Can you explain to everyone in simple terms what cardinality is?
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about cardinality, we're really referring to the uniqueness of a particular data set. And so I can show you here in Lightstep, just pop open a trace view. The way we kind of think about this is specifically within the context of key value pairs. So you'll notice that you have the ability to kind of add attribution throughout your data that you send to us, whether that's metric data or trace data. You use that attribution or tagging in order to search for or identify specific traces. So in this case, I can actually see this user ID and immediately jump in and query for this user ID, this particular component, a status code. The number of unique values there is what we generally refer to as the cardinality of those attributes. And so when we say Lightstep has infinite cardinality support, you can actually send us values that have billions or more unique values in the system at any one time. Those are all accessible. And so hopefully that answers your question. Certainly feel free to chime in the chat and I can provide more context if not.
Awesome. Okay, and another question here is, what is required to power change intelligence?
Yeah, it's a great question. So with regard to change intelligence, of course, we need the data. So the metric data and the trace data, we collect those out of the box with our launcher. So if you're interested, we do have, or within OpenTelemetry, there's some technology that does automatic instrumentation for a lot of popular programming languages. We have a layer that we've built that we call Lightstep launchers or Lightstep OpenTelemetry launchers. And that allows us to take that automatic instrumentation layer and put it into your application with one line of configuration. So if you're interested in getting the data in, it's very easy. Would recommend checking out our launchers. You can also go to opentelemetry.lightstep.com for more information there. And then with regard to what we need on the data in order to enable this, it's really just a service tag on the metric. So you'll notice within the concept of metrics, we have a lot of attribution. In this case, we're faceting by a particular host. Usually we also have a service tag that's attached to those metrics as well. And that just tells us where was this metric emitted from in your system. It can be a piece of infrastructure, it can be a service. And again, we collect that data automatically as well.
Wonderful. Okay, we have time for just 2 more questions.
Sure.
So next one, this kind of goes on top of what you were just talking about, but how easy is it to get started and do you use any agents?
Yeah, so the agents, no. So really when we think about agents or the verbiage behind agents, it really has to do more with both. You get the automatic instrumentation piece, so you drop some sort of a binary or attach some sort of an an agent to your running infrastructure, and it can go in and do some bytecode instrumentation or otherwise figure out what data we need to pull out of the environment. We do have the equivalent of that. That's what we call our Lightstep launchers for open telemetry. But the other side, the way that a lot of incumbent vendors might talk about agents, it does a lot of aggregation on process. And the big thing with Lightstep is that we do not do any kind of processing on the resources that your applications are running on. We collect a massive amount of data. And so our goal is just to basically ship that data as efficiently as possible using any combination of streaming or really efficient protobuf. It doesn't matter, but we want to egress the data very efficiently. So we don't have any type of heavyweight agent. We offload all that processing into Lightstep's infrastructure. So hopefully that answers your question. We do have more context, of course, on the performance overhead of that.
Wonderful. Okay, last question. This one's a little bit longer.
Sure.
The percentile latency numbers you are showing, are they for top level span duration? So that's one part of it. Mm-hmm. And then the second part is the root cause analysis is first order. So what is the single attribute tag that affects latency, or it's the second order, like it's like this combination of tags affects latency?
Yep, great question. And I do see that here as well. So to go through, the first is the percentile latency numbers we show are for top level span duration in the sense that, or sorry, not top level, but you'll notice that we scope these. So if I start going through our change intelligence here, we have these changes that are kind of bundled or put around the operations that are occurring in your traces. So these are spans. These aren't top level spans. These can be spans like mid-level through your trace. That's a good way to think about it is we're using the distributed trace data, which occurs across your entire stack, to understand where are you being bottlenecked or where is contention coming from. And so what that means, and maybe to just visualize this a little bit differently, in this view of Lightstep, this is more of a traditional APM-like view. But I'll open up one of our pages here, and you'll note that we track, these are actually all, this seems like a very sophisticated question, so I want to get into the weeds a little bit, in that we build these KPIs around, or SLIs around the operations by turning span data into metrics. And that happens on every span, not just the root level. The other thing that we do there is we also allow you to take that information and we automatically build what's called a critical path latency number. And that tells us, basically looking at all of the parallelism that's happening in your stack, how much of each span has, or what portion of each span time is actually blocking other work from occurring. And so we use those in our numbers as well. And then to go down, the root cause analysis, is it first order? What is the single attribute tag that affects latency, or is it second order? So at this time, I will be the first to admit that the verbiage you're using around first order and second order is a little foreign to me. So I don't want to necessarily misspeak, but I will say today it is single attribution. So if you do have multiple attributes, the way that we manifest that is less that they are combined and more that we see that there are multiple attributes, and we'll actually stack rank those for you in order of confidence. And so you'll be able to see here, if I were to, let me just pull this up, pop into a quick change intelligence. I can also just demonstrate again how fast it is. But we load this up and you'll notice that there's a ton of hypotheses here. We'll show you the ones that we feel most confident in. And as we move forward, we do intend to build more second order, I guess, to use your term, analysis as well. But the idea we do this now is we do break them out so that you can rule them out or validate them on a per attribute level. Hopefully that answered your question. I know we are out of time, and I think we also saw some additional open questions. So feel free to chime in. We're happy to contact you after the fact. And Kelly, I don't know if you have anything else to add there, but I also know I'm like 40 seconds over, so I'll stop talking and just say thank you all for joining.
Yes, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Parker, for presenting. And as a reminder, you'll receive a copy of this presentation. Other than that, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, if you would like to receive more information on today's topic, go ahead and visit us at lightstep.com.